To you. Dear reader, this is a story about second chances, about two worn-out souls who found in each other what they reckoned was lost forever. It is the kind of tale our grandfolks might have shared on a porch swing at dusk, when fireflies danced and the world grew hushed and gentle. Some folks say the West was won by guns and gold, but I believe it was built by ordinary people who chose kindness over cruelty, who made homes from nothing but sweat, prayer, and stubborn hope. If you have ever lost someone dear, if you have ever felt alone, even in a crowded room, if you have ever wondered whether your heart might learn to beat again, this story is for you. Pour yourself a cup of coffee. Sit a spell. Let me carry you back to Texas. Summer of 1887, when the land was parched and the sky stretched on forever, and two strangers met at a forgotten railway stop at the edge of nowhere. The storyteller. There are moments in a man's life when everything changes, though he does not know it yet. Jacob Miller had no intention of bringing anyone home that day. He had come to the station for barley and nothing more. 37 years old, 3 years a widower. He had learned to expect nothing from this world except what he could build with his own two hands. Hope was a luxury he could no longer afford. But life, as my grandmother used to say, has a peculiar way of surprising us when we stop looking. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as burdens. Sometimes the person you never asked for becomes the person you cannot live without. What happened at that lonely railway stop was not fate. Exactly. It was simply two broken people, standing at the same crossroads, each carrying a sorrow too heavy for one heart alone. This is how it began. The last bag of barley landed in the wagon bed with a thud that sent dust swirling into the afternoon light. Jacob Miller wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. His shirt clung to his shoulders, dark with sweat. The August sun had been bearing down since dawn, and the wooden platform of the railway station shimmered in the heat like something not quite real. He reached for his canteen, took a long drink. The water was warm and tasted of leather, but it was wet, and that was enough. The smell of the place hung thick in the still air, coal smoke from the morning train, axle grease baking on the iron rails, pine boards warping under the relentless sun. A horsefly droned past his ear, somewhere down the track. A crow called out once and fell silent. Behind him, the station house sat quiet, paint peeling off its clapboard walls in long, tired strips. A single window reflecting the bleached sky. The 10:15 from San Antonio had come and gone hours ago, leaving nothing behind but the stink of engine oil and the memory of its whistle. Nothing and no one. Or so he thought. Mr. Miller, Jacob turned. Old Emmett Hawkins stood in the doorway of the station office, his telegraph key silent on the desk behind him. The station master was 70 if he was a day, bent like a mesquite branch, but his eyes were sharp as ever. He smelled of pipe tobacco and the peppermint drops he kept in his vest pocket. Emmett, you fixing to head back directly? Soon as I tie down these bags. Emmett scratched his chin. He had that look, the one he got when he knew something you did not. Well now, I reckon you ain't seen her yet. Jacob's hands paused on the rope. Seen who? The woman. Come in on the morning train. Emmett jerked his thumb toward the far end of the platform. Been sitting there since 8 o'clock. Won't budge. Won't talk to nobody neither. Jacob followed the gesture with his eyes. At first he saw nothing but shadow. The overhang of the station roof cut a dark rectangle against the glare, and his vision took a moment to adjust. Then the shape resolved itself. A woman, sitting on a wooden trunk at the edge of the platform, where the boards gave way to dirt and scrub grass. She faced away from him, looking out at the empty tracks that stretched toward the horizon and vanished into the heat shimmer. She was utterly still. Who is she? Jacob heard himself ask. Mail-order bride, from what I gather. Emmett spat tobacco juice into the dust. Fellow named Crane was supposed to meet her. You know him, got that place up past Miller Creek. Jacob knew him. A loud man with soft hands. The kind who smiled too much and meant none of it. He come for her. Oh, he come all right. Emmett's voice carried something hard in it. Something that sounded like disgust. Took one look at her. Said she weren't what he ordered. Said he'd found himself a younger option. Then he got back on his horse and rode off without so much as a fare thee well. The words hung in the air like the smell of something burning. Jacob stared at the woman's back, at the rigid line of her spine, at the way she held her head up despite everything. She'd been sitting there all this time. All day long, I offered her water, offered her a chair inside where it's cooler. She just shook her head. Emmett lowered his voice, and Jacob could smell the peppermint on his breath. I tell you, Jacob, I ain't seen nothing like it. What kind of man does that? Orders a woman like she's a piece of furniture from the Sears catalog, then sends her back because she ain't shiny enough. Jacob did not answer. He was already walking. His boots made hollow sounds on the platform boards. Thunk, thunk, thunk. The woman did not turn, did not move. He came around the trunk and stopped a few feet in front of her, blocking the sun. Her face lifted into the sudden shadow. She was not young, not old either. Somewhere in the middle years, where life had started to leave its marks. Brown hair pulled back from a face that might have been pretty once. Before hardship drew its lines around her mouth and eyes, she wore a dress of faded blue calico. The fabric washed so many times it had gone soft as old paper. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers laced together, the knuckles white. She did not speak. Neither did he. The silence stretched between them, strange and heavy. A hot wind moved across the platform, carrying the smell of sage and dry earth, stirring the hem of her dress. Ma'am, his voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. You need help. Her eyes met his. Gray, clear. There was something in them not defeat. Exactly. Not even sadness. More like a wall. A carefully constructed wall that said, I have been hurt before, and I will not let you see how much this hurts now. I am waiting, she said. Her voice was steady. For the next train. Next train don't come through till Thursday. I know. That's 4 days. I know. Jacob looked at the trunk beneath her, looked at her empty hands, looked at the endless flat nothing that surrounded them on all sides, brown grass, white sky, and not a soul for miles. You got somewhere to go, family? No. Friends? No. Money? She did not answer, but the faint tightening of her jaw told him everything. He should walk away. He knew that. This was not his problem. He had his own troubles, drought killing his cattle, debts piling up, a heart that had stopped feeling anything 3 years ago when they put his wife and son in the ground. He should walk away. My name is Jacob Miller, he said instead. I got a ranch about 12 miles north of here. It ain't much, but there's a roof and 3 meals a day. He paused, took a breath. I need someone to cook and keep house. The work is honest and the pay is fair. The wall in her eyes flickered. Just for a moment. I am not looking for charity. Mr. Miller, didn't offer you none. I'm offering a job. She studied him. Her gaze moved across his face like she was reading a map, searching for the lie, the trap, the hidden cruelty. He let her look. He had nothing to hide. Why, she asked finally, you don't know me? Because I know what it feels like to be left behind. He did not say that. He said, "Can you cook?" Something shifted in her expression. The wall cracked, just a little. "Yes," she said. "I can cook." Jacob nodded once. Then he reached down and picked up one end of her trunk. The leather handle was warm from the sun, worn smooth by years of use. "Then let's go. Before we continue, I'd love to know which city you're watching from. Let's get back to the story." The wagon lurched over a rut. The woman's shoulder bumped against his, and she pulled away quick, pressing herself against the far edge of the seat. Jacob kept his eyes on the road. The horses plodded on. Dust rose from their hooves in lazy clouds that hung in the still air before settling on everything: the barley bags, the wooden trunk, the faded blue of her dress. The sun sat heavy on their backs, like a hand pressing down. The leather reins had grown slick with sweat in his palms. Neither of them spoke. Miles of brown grass rolled past. The land here was flat and cracked. The earth split into patterns that looked like the skin of something old and dying. The smell of sage drifted on the hot wind, mixed with the sharper scent of horse sweat and axle grease. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals, searching for anything still alive down below. "The creek dried up in June," Jacob said. His voice sounded strange after so much silence. "Ain't rained proper since April." She nodded, said nothing. He pointed toward a cluster of dark shapes in the distance. "Those are my cattle. What's left of them." The shapes resolved as they drew closer. Thin animals with ribs showing through their hides, gathered around a hole in the ground where water should have been. Mud. That was all. Brown mud crusted at the edges, shrinking day by day. The smell hit them as they passed the sour stink of desperation, of creatures waiting to die. The woman looked at the cattle, at the empty sky, at the endless stretch of dying land. "How do you keep them alive?" she asked. "Haul water from the well, 2 miles there, 2 miles back, twice a day." He flicked the reins. "Well's going dry, too." The wagon crested a low rise, and the ranch house came into view. It was smaller than she expected. He could see that in the way her eyes moved across it, the weathered boards gone silver with age. The sagging porch, the windmill standing motionless against the sky, a barn listing slightly to one side, a chicken coop, a clothesline with nothing on it, and on the porch, a rocking chair. Just one. It sat facing west, toward where the sun would set in a few hours. The wood was gray with age, the seat worn smooth from years of use. Beside it, on the dusty floorboards, a smaller chair, child-sized, empty. The woman's gaze lingered there. Jacob's hands tightened on the reins. She turned to look at him, those gray eyes searching his face again, reading what he could not bring himself to say. "Mr. Miller," she said quietly, "how long have you lived here alone?" His jaw locked. The question sat between them like a stone too heavy to lift. 3 years. 3 years. 2 months. 11 days. He opened his mouth to answer, and the windmill groaned, a single long creak of metal on metal. Then silence. The blades had stopped turning. The kitchen smelled of dust and old grease and something else, something faint and sad, like a room that had forgotten what it was for. Anna stood in the doorway, her trunk still sitting on the porch where Jacob had left it. He had mumbled something about checking on the windmill and disappeared around the side of the house. The screen door had slapped shut behind him. And now she was alone. She stepped inside. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling beams in long, dusty strands. The cast-iron stove squatted against the far wall, cold and dark, its surface filmed with a layer of grime that spoke of months without use. On the wooden counter, a coffee pot sat beside a hand-crank grinder, both coated in the same fine dust that covered everything. A row of wooden spoons hung from pegs on the wall, untouched, their handles darkened with age. Anna ran her finger along the edge of the table, drew a line through the dust, looked at the gray on her fingertip. This kitchen had not been used in a long time. Months, maybe longer. She opened the pantry door. The hinges squealed. Inside, the shelves held canned beans, dried corn, a sack of flour that had gone hard at the edges, salt pork wrapped in cloth, the fat gone yellow, coffee beans in a tin with a dented lid, the supplies of a man who ate to survive, not to live. She found matches on a shelf above the stove, kindling in a box beside it. Her hands moved without thinking, crumpling newspaper, stacking thin sticks, striking the match. The sulfur smell bit her nose. The flame caught. Smoke curled up into the flue. The stove began to warm. Anna pumped water from the hand pump at the sink. The first few strokes brought nothing but air and a grinding sound that set her teeth on edge. Then water coughed out, rust-colored at first. Then, clear enough, she filled a pot, set it on the stove to heat. The metal ticked and pinged as it warmed. She worked in silence. Beans into a pot with salt pork, and a little molasses she found in the back of the pantry, the jar sticky. The lid crusted shut until she pried it loose with a knife. Cornmeal mixed with water and a pinch of salt, shaped into rounds with her palms, pressed flat. Laid into a cast-iron skillet she had scrubbed clean with sand and elbow grease. Coffee beans fed into the grinder, the handle turning with a sound like bones cracking, the smell rising up dark and bitter and familiar. The kitchen filled with warmth, with the smell of food cooking, beans bubbling, cornbread crisping, coffee steaming, with something that had been missing from this house for longer than she could guess. Footsteps on the porch. The screen door opened. Jacob stood in the doorway, his hands black with grease, his shirt dark with sweat. He looked at the stove, at the steam rising from the pots, at her. His face did something strange. A flicker, gone before she could name it. Windmill gear was stuck, he said. Fixed it. Good. She wiped her hands on a cloth she had found in a drawer. Supper's ready. He washed at the pump outside. She heard the splash of water, the scrubbing of hands, the sound of him clearing his throat. When he came back in, his face was wet, his hair pushed back from his forehead, dripping onto the collar of his shirt. They sat across from each other at the table. Anna set down the plates. Beans, still steaming, the molasses giving them a dark shine. 2 rounds of cornbread, golden brown from the skillet, the edges crisp. She poured coffee into tin cups, the liquid black and strong, steam rising in the lamplight. Jacob looked at the food, then at her. I reckon we ought to say grace, he said quietly. Anna folded her hands, bowed her head. Jacob's voice was rough, halting, like a man speaking a language he had not used in a long time. Lord, we thank you for this food, for the hands that prepared it, for... He paused, swallowed. For your mercies, which we don't always deserve. Amen. Amen, Anna whispered. He picked up his fork, looked at the cornbread. His hand stopped. Something moved across his face. Quick. Gone almost before she saw it. He stared at the bread like it was something from another life. His jaw tightened. The fork trembled, just slightly, between his fingers. Mr. Miller. He blinked. The fork shook again. It's round, he said. His voice was strange, thick. Anna looked at the cornbread. I always make it round. My mother taught me that way, back when I was just a girl. She said, she made it round, too. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. Anna did not ask who. She did not need to. Jacob lifted the fork, cut into the cornbread. The inside was yellow and soft, still warm. He took a bite, chewed slowly. The taste of corn and salt and the faint sweetness of the molasses from the beans. He swallowed. "It's good," he said. "Thank you kindly." They ate without speaking. The only sounds were the scrape of forks on tin, the creak of the house settling in the cooling air, the distant lowing of cattle somewhere in the dark. The kerosene lamp flickered between them, casting shadows that jumped and swayed on the walls. When the plates were empty, Anna rose to clear them. Jacob stayed seated, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup, staring at the wall where a nail stuck out, a nail that had once held something, though she could not guess what. "The water situation," she said, her back to him as she worked at the sink. The water ran cold over her hands. "How bad is it?" "Bad?" His voice was flat. "Well's down to maybe 6 feet. Used to be 20. And the creek—" He stopped, started again. "They used to swim there. In the summers. They—" Anna's hands went still in the soapy water. "The creek ran clear back then," Jacob continued. He did not seem to realize what he had said. Or maybe he did. And he could not stop. The words came out like water through a crack in a dam. "Cool even in August. He learned to swim there. 4 years old and fearless." She had to watch him every second or he'd go under just to scare her, come up laughing and spitting water. His voice broke. The coffee cup sat on the table, untouched now. His shoulders were rigid beneath his shirt, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath the skin. Anna dried her hands on the cloth, turned around. "Mr. Miller." He did not look up. What was her name? The question hung in the air. Somewhere outside, crickets had begun to sing a high, steady sound that filled the silence. The heat of the day was fading, leaving behind the cool quiet of a Texas night. The lamp flame guttered in a draft from somewhere, throwing shadows across his face. Jacob pushed back from the table. The chair legs scraped against the floor with a sound like a cry. "I'll show you to your room," he said. The room was small. A narrow bed with a quilt folded at the foot, faded colors. Hand-stitched squares. The work of someone who had taken care with every stitch. A washstand with a chipped basin. A crack running through the porcelain like a scar. A window that looked out on nothing but darkness and the faint shapes of mesquite trees against the stars. The walls were bare except for a single nail where something had once hung. A picture, maybe. Or a sampler. Something that had mattered to someone. This was... Jacob stopped in the doorway. His hand gripped the frame. The knuckles white. "There's clean sheets in the chest. Breakfast is at 5. He turned to go. "Mr. Miller." He paused but did not turn around. "Thank you," Anna said, "for bringing me here. For the work." A long moment passed. His back was to her. His shoulders a dark shape against the lamplight from the hall. She could hear him breathing, slow, deliberate, the breath of a man holding something in. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "This land takes more than it gives." He walked away. His boots sounded on the floorboards, then on the porch. The screen door opened and closed with a slap. Anna sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was thin, stuffed with corn husks that rustled beneath her weight like whispers. She looked around the room, at the small space, at the nail on the wall, at the window that showed nothing but night. The quilt smelled of cedar and something else. Lavender. Maybe. Faint. almost gone. Through the thin walls, she could hear him. Footsteps on the porch, back and forth, back and forth. The creak of boards under his weight, the rhythm of a man who could not rest. She lay down, pulled the quilt over her shoulders, closed her eyes. The footsteps continued. 1 hour, 2. The moon rose and crossed the window and sank again. Sometime deep in the night, they stopped. Anna listened to the silence, to the crickets, to the call of an owl somewhere in the darkness, to her own breathing in the stillness of this strange room that smelled of lavender and loss. And then soft, muffled, coming from somewhere outside a sound, low, broken. The sound of a man who had held everything in for too long. Anna lay very still. She did not go to him. She knew, somehow, that he would not want her to. But she did not sleep either. Not for a long, long time. 4 in the morning. The sky still black outside the window. Jacob pulled on his boots in the dark, the leather stiff and cold against his feet. His muscles ached from yesterday's work hauling water, mending fence, checking on cattle that grew thinner by the day. The same work he had done every day for 3 years. The same emptiness waiting for him in the kitchen. He walked down the hall. The floorboards creaked under his weight, pushed open the door to the main room, and stopped. Light, warm and yellow, spilling from the kitchen doorway. The smell of coffee strong, black, bitter in the best way. Bacon crackling in a pan, the fat popping and hissing, the yeasty scent of biscuits in the oven. Anna stood at the stove, her back to him. She had pinned her hair up, exposing the pale curve of her neck. A worn apron, one he did not recognize, must have been in her trunk, was tied at her waist. She moved with quiet efficiency, flipping bacon with a long fork, checking the biscuits through the oven door. "You're up early," he said. She did not turn. "So are you." He sat at the table. A plate appeared in front of him. Bacon, the edges crisp and brown. Eggs fried in the bacon grease. The yolks still soft. Biscuits that steamed when he broke them open. The inside white and fluffy. A cup of coffee, dark as night. She sat across from him with her own plate. Jacob bowed his head. "Lord, we thank you for this food, and for the hands that made it. Bless this day and the work ahead." "Amen. Amen," Anna said quietly. He ate. The bacon was salty and perfect, the eggs rich, the biscuits melted on his tongue. He could not remember the last time he had tasted food this good. When the plates were empty, Jacob pushed back his chair. "I'm going to start on the dam today," he said. "There's a low spot about a mile east, where the land dips between 2 rises. If I can build up the banks there, catch the runoff when the rains come." He stopped, swallowed the word if. Might could save what's left of the herd. Anna looked at him. "How long will it take?" "Weeks, maybe longer. Depends on how fast I can dig." She stood, gathered the plates, set them in the basin with a clatter of tin. "I'll come with you." "That ain't necessary. The house can wait." She untied her apron, hung it on the peg by the door. Her movements were quick, certain. "Show me where to dig." The sun rose red over the eastern hills. They walked in silence, Jacob carrying the pickaxe over his shoulder, the weight familiar against his collarbone. Anna walked beside him with a shovel and a burlap-sack biscuits wrapped in cloth, a canteen of water, the tin cup they would share. The grass crunched beneath their boots, dry and brittle. breaking into dust with each step. The air smelled of sage, and the faint sweetness of decay from somewhere far off. The low spot sat at the base of two gentle slopes, maybe a quarter-mile across. Erosion had carved a shallow bowl in the earth over the years, and a trickle of water barely more than a seep. A dark stain on the rocks oozed from between the stones at the far end. "If I build the banks up here and here," Jacob said, pointing with the pickaxe, "the water's got nowhere to go but down into the basin. When the rains come, it'll collect, form a pond deep enough to last." Anna studied the terrain. Her eyes moved across the slopes, the rocks, the pathetic trickle of water that barely wet the ground before the sun drank it up. "How deep does it need to be?" "Deep enough to last through a dry spell. 4 feet, maybe 5. She looked at the expanse of hard-packed earth, at the single pickaxe, at the one shovel. "Then I reckon we best get started," she said. The first hour was the hardest. Jacob swung the pickaxe in steady rhythm. The blade bit into the earth, loosened chunks of clay and stone. The impact jarred up through his arms, into his shoulders, down his spine. Behind him, Anna shoveled the debris into a pile, then carried it to the edge of the basin where the banks would rise. The sun climbed. The air grew thick and still, heavy as a wool blanket. Sweat soaked through Jacob's shirt, dripped from his chin, fell onto the dry ground where it disappeared like it had never been. He glanced back at Anna. Her dress was dark with moisture, clinging to her back. Tendrils of hair had escaped her pins and stuck to her forehead in wet strands. Her face was flushed red, and her breath came in short, harsh gasps. But she did not stop. Scoop, lift, carry, dump, return. Scoop, lift, carry, dump, return. The rhythm never broke. "You don't have to do this," Jacob said. She drove the shovel into the dirt, leaned on the handle. Her chest heaved beneath the sweat-soaked fabric of her dress. "Neither do you," she said. "But here we are." He turned back to the pickaxe. Midday. The sun directly overhead, white and merciless, beating down like a hammer on an anvil. They sat in the shade of a lone oak tree at the edge of the worksite. The trunk was thick and gnarled, the bark rough against Jacob's back. Anna had brought the biscuits in the canteen. They passed the water back and forth, drinking in small sips to make it last. The water was warm now, tasting of leather and copper, but it was wet. "Where are you from?" Jacob asked. The question came out before he could think to stop it. Anna wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. A streak of dirt ran across her chin. "Pennsylvania, a town called Scranton. Coal country." "Yes." She looked out at the brown landscape, so different from anything she had known. "Nothing like this. Why did you leave?" She was quiet for a long moment. Her fingers picked at a loose thread on her sleeve, winding it around and around. "I was a maid," she said finally, "in a big house. The family that owned the mine, the Harringtons. I worked there for 12 years. Since I was 16, she paused. When the mother passed on, the son inherited everything. He had notions about what else I ought to do for my wages." Jacob's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists against his thighs. "I left that very night. Took a train to Philadelphia. Saw an advertisement in the paper." She smiled, but there was no humor in it, no warmth. "Mail-order brides wanted for the Western Territories. Room and board guaranteed. A chance to start fresh. And you believed it. I had nothing else left to believe in." The words hung between them like smoke. Jacob looked at his hands, calloused, dirt-caked, the nails broken and black with grime. "My wife's name was Sarah," he said. Anna went still beside him. We met at a church social in Austin. I was 22. She was 19. Prettiest girl I ever saw, dark hair, green eyes, a laugh that made you feel like everything was right with the world. He picked up a stick, drew a line in the dust. Her father didn't approve, said I had nothing to offer. He was right, too. But she married you anyway. She said she'd rather be poor with me than rich with anyone else. The stick snapped between his fingers. The sound was sharp in the still air. Turned out she got both. Poor and alone. You weren't alone. You had each other. For a while. He threw the broken stick away, watched it land in the dust. The fever came through in the fall of '84. Took half the county. Took her. Took our boy. How old was he? 4. Jacob's voice cracked on the word like a dry branch. He cleared his throat. His name was Samuel. He wanted to be a cowboy. Used to follow me around with a stick for a gun, saying, "Bang, bang, pa, you're dead." Anna said nothing. She reached over and placed her hand on his arm. Just for a moment. Just long enough for him to feel the warmth of her palm through his sleeve. Then she pulled it back. "We should get back to work," she said. Jacob nodded, rose to his feet. His legs ached. His back screamed. They walked back to the dig site in silence. But something had shifted between them. The distance had shrunk. The space felt different now. Smaller. Late afternoon. The shadows growing long across the dry earth. Anna drove her shovel into the ground. Lifted. Her foot slipped on a patch of loose clay. She stumbled forward, arms pinwheeling, and went down hard, into the mud. She sat there at the bottom of the shallow pit, covered in brown muck from waist to boots. Her hair had come completely undone, hanging in wet ropes around her face. A streak of dirt ran across her cheek like war paint. Jacob stared. And then a sound came out of him. Rough, rusty, unfamiliar, like a door that had not been opened in years. It took him a moment to realize he was laughing. Anna looked up at him. Her eyes went wide, shocked. "Are you laughing at me, Mr. Miller?" "No, ma'am." He reached down, offered his hand. His shoulders shook. "I wouldn't dare." She took it. Her grip was strong, her fingers slick with mud. He pulled her to her feet. That was when he saw her palms. The skin was raw and red, angry as a burn. Blisters had formed across the base of her fingers, then broken open. Weeping clear fluid, fresh blood mixed with the dirt and mud, running down her wrists. The laughter died in his throat. "Why didn't you say something?" His voice came out sharper than he intended. "It's nothing. It ain't nothing." He held her hands in his, turning them over gently. The wounds were inflamed, the edges white and puckered. "You've been working like this all day. The work needed doing." He looked at her face, at the stubborn set of her jaw, at the gray eyes that refused to show pain even now. "Wait here," he said. He walked back to where they had left their supplies. In the burlap sack, beneath the remaining biscuits, was a small tin. He had packed it out of habit, the salve Sarah used to make, from lard and dried calendula and a bit of beeswax. He had kept making it after she died, though he could not have said why. The smell of it brought her back, her hands working the mixture, the kitchen warm with the scent of herbs. He returned to Anna, opened the tin. The smell rose up familiar, achingly so. "Give me your hands." She hesitated, then extended them, palms up. He dipped his fingers into the salve, began to work it into her wounds, gently, carefully. The medicine was cool against her heated skin. She flinched once, a quick intake of breath, but did not pull away. "This'll help," he said. "Keep the infection out." "Thank you." He looked up. Their faces were close. Close enough to see the flecks of gold in her gray eyes. Close enough to see the pulse beating in her throat. Close enough to feel her breath warm on his cheek. The moment stretched. And then a sound. Hoofbeats. Coming fast from the direction of the main road, drumming against the hard-packed earth like thunder. Jacob released her hands, stepped back, turned toward the noise. A rider was approaching. A big man on a black horse, kicking up a plume of dust against the fading light. Jacob's hand moved instinctively toward his hip, but he had left his gun at the house. The rider was not trouble. It was old Emmett Hawkins from the station, his mule lathered and blowing hard, foam dripping from the bit. He pulled up short, pushed his hat back from his forehead. The smell of horse sweat and dust rolled off him in waves. "Jacob, thought I'd find you out here." His eyes moved to Anna, lingered a moment on the mud caking her dress, then returned to Jacob. "Got a telegram for you. Came through this afternoon. Figured it might be important." Jacob took the folded paper, read it in the fading light. "Cattle prices down 40%. Stop buyers backing out. Stop. Hold shipment until further notice. Stop." He crushed the telegram in his fist. "Bad news?" Emmett asked. "Is there any other kind these days?" The old man shrugged. He looked at the half-dug basin, at the pile of displaced earth, at the two figures covered in dust and sweat and mud. "Building a dam. I reckon trying to. Smart thinking." Emmett turned his mule. "Rain's coming, they say. Maybe 2 weeks. Maybe 3. He spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Might want to hurry it along." He rode off into the gathering dusk. Jacob watched him go until the sound of hoofbeats faded into the whisper of wind through dry grass. "What did the telegram say?" Anna asked. "Nothing that changes anything." He picked up his pickaxe. "Let's get back to the house." The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Up before dawn, when the sky was still black and the stars still burned overhead. Coffee and biscuits in the lamplight, the kitchen warm from the stove. The walk to the dig site as the sun cracked the horizon, painting the clouds pink and gold. Work through the morning heat, the pickaxe rising and falling, the shovel biting into earth. Rest beneath the oak tree when the sun sat directly overhead, too brutal to endure. Work again until the shadows grew long and the air began to cool. Then the slow walk back, muscles aching, skin burned, hands raw. The dam grew, inch by inch, foot by foot. Anna never complained. She matched him shovel for shovel, hour for hour. When her blisters healed and calloused over, she worked faster. When a new blister broke fresh, she wrapped it in cloth torn from an old petticoat and kept going. Jacob found himself watching her when she did not notice. The way she wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her wrist. The way she paused sometimes to look out at the horizon. Her eyes distant, searching for something he could not name. He did not know what to make of her. He did not know what to make of himself. The evenings were different. After supper, when the dishes were washed and dried and put away, they would sit in the main room. The cast-iron stove glowed with coals, throwing warmth into the cooling night. Anna had found a sewing basket in one of the cupboards, Sarah's, though he did not tell her that, and she mended clothes that had gone too long without attention. Shirts with missing buttons, trousers with frayed hems, a quilt with holes worn through from years of use. Jacob sat across from her in the old armchair, a book open in his lap. The same book he had been reading for 3 years. He never got past page 47. The fire crackled and popped. A log shifted, sending sparks up the flue. Outside, an owl called 2 low notes. Then silence. The wind moved through the eaves with a sound like breathing. Tonight, his eyes kept drifting to the shelf above the fireplace. The box sat there, small, pine wood with a carved lid, flowers and vines, the work of his own hands in those dark weeks after the funeral, when his fingers needed something to do or he would have gone mad. The wood had darkened with age, but the carving was still sharp. Inside were the things he could not throw away, the things he could not look at, the things that kept him awake at night and haunted his dreams. Anna followed his gaze. Her needle paused mid-stitch. She did not ask. The fire crackled. The lamp flickered. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the gaps in the door frame. "It rained once," Jacob said. Anna's needle went still. "Last spring. Just a few minutes came out of nowhere like a gift." His voice was low, rough. "We ran outside, Sarah and Samuel and me, and stood in it. Let it soak through our clothes. Samuel laughed so hard he could barely breathe. Said the raindrops tickled his nose." The needle resumed its motion. In and out, in and out. The thread whispered through the fabric. He had her laugh, exactly the same. This high, bright sound that made you want to laugh too, even when nothing was funny. Jacob closed the book, set it aside. His hands trembled slightly. "I used to read to him at night, from the Bible, mostly. The stories, David and Goliath, Daniel in the lion's den. He liked the ones with heroes. He sounds like he was a happy child." "He was," Jacob's voice cracked. "He was the happiest kid I ever knew. Woke up every morning like it was Christmas, like the world had something new to show him and he couldn't wait to see what it was." He stood, walked to the shelf. His hand hovered over the box. "You don't have to," Anna said softly. "I know." He lifted the lid. The smell rose up cedar chips, placed inside to keep the moths away. His fingers found the photograph, drew it out. The image was faded, brown and cream, the edges curling, a daguerreotype, taken by a traveling photographer who had come through town 6 months before the fever. Sarah sat in a chair, her hands folded in her lap, her face serious the way people got when they had to hold perfectly still. Samuel stood beside her, one hand on her knee. He was grinning. He could never hold still. That boy never could do what he was told. Jacob brought the photograph to Anna, sat beside her on the settee, held it so she could see. "This cost me a week's wages," he said. "I told Sarah it was foolish. She said someday I'd be grateful." Anna looked at the image, at the woman with the gentle face, at the boy with the grin that seemed to leap right off the paper. "She was beautiful," she said. "She was." His thumb traced the edge of the photograph. "She used to sing while she cooked. Hymns, mostly. Sometimes songs from when she was a girl, songs her mama taught her. Samuel would sing along even when he didn't know the words. He'd just make sounds, follow along as best he could." His voice cracked. He stopped, breathed. The fire popped and hissed. Anna set down her sewing. She did not speak. She did not offer comfort or empty words. She simply sat beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her shoulder against his. "The fever took her first," he said. 3 days. Start to finish. I held her hand at the end. She told me to take care of Samuel. Made me promise." He laughed, a broken, hollow sound. "I promised. And then he got sick too." 4 days I sat with him, bathed his forehead, told him stories, prayed until I lost my voice. His jaw tightened. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. The Lord saw fit to take them both. And I've been trying to figure out why ever since. Jacob. His name. Just his name. The first time she had said it without the Mr. in front. He looked at her. Her eyes were wet, but she was not crying. She held his gaze without flinching. I never had anyone to lose, she said quietly. My parents died when I was 7. Cholera. I don't remember their faces anymore, just shapes, shadows. I've spent my whole life alone in other people's houses, wearing other people's cast-offs, invisible to everyone. She paused. I used to reckon that was the worst kind of pain. Having no one at all. It's not... No. She reached over, placed her hand on his. The worst kind is having someone you love with your whole heart, and then losing them. Her touch was warm. Her fingers were rough from work, calloused like his own. Jacob did not pull away. They sat like that for a long time. The fire burned down to embers. The lamp guttered and dimmed. Outside, the wind died, and the night grew still as held breath. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. Anna lifted her head. Did you hear that? Jacob listened. Another rumble, low and long, rolling across the plains from the west like the voice of something ancient. Storm coming, he said. Rain. Maybe. They went to the porch, stood side by side, looking out at the darkness. The stars had vanished behind a wall of clouds that blotted out the sky. Lightning flickered deep within them, silent and far away. If it rains, Anna began. The dam's not ready. How much more do we need? Another 2 feet, 3 to be safe. The wind picked up again. Cool now, carrying the smell of moisture, the first real moisture in months. The scent of rain on the horizon, of water falling somewhere far away. How long do we have? Anna asked. Jacob watched the lightning, counted the seconds until the thunder reached them. 5, 4, 3. The thunder cracked. Closer now. Much closer. Not long enough, he said. The storm passed in the night without dropping a single drop of rain. Jacob stood on the porch at dawn, watching the clouds retreat toward the east. They had teased and rumbled for hours, lightning dancing across the sky like promises. But in the end, they had given nothing. The ground was as dry as before. The air smelled of dust and something sour, the smell of hope gone stale. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. Anna came out with 2 cups of coffee, steam rising into the cool morning air. She handed him one without speaking. They stood together, watching the sun rise over a thirsty land. We need to work faster, Jacob said. I know. They were at the dig site by 7, working in the cool of the morning before the heat set in. The dam had taken shape over the past weeks, a curved wall of packed earth and stone. Rising 3 feet above the basin floor, the seep at the far end had strengthened slightly, feeding a shallow pool that glinted in the early light. The water smelled of minerals and mud. But it was water. It was not enough. Not nearly enough. Jacob swung the pickaxe in steady rhythm. His shoulders burned. His back ached with a deep, grinding pain that never quite went away anymore. The blisters on his hands had long since hardened into calluses, but new ones formed beneath them, deeper, angrier. Anna worked beside him, shoveling the loosened earth onto the growing wall. Her movements were efficient now, practiced. She had learned the work the way she seemed to learn everything quietly. completely, without complaint. The sun climbed. The shadows shrank. The heat pressed down. And then hoofbeats. Jacob straightened, shaded his eyes against the glare. 3 riders were approaching from the south. They moved at an easy pace, in no particular hurry. Their horses fresh and well-fed. As they drew closer, Jacob could make out details. Fine saddles with silver conchos, clean clothes, not a speck of dust. Guns on their hips, the holsters oiled and supple. The lead rider was a big man on a black stallion. He wore a gray suit despite the heat. A gold watch chain glinting against his vest. His face was broad and red, the face of a man who ate well and often. A thick mustache covered his upper lip, waxed at the ends. Silas Brennan. Jacob set down the pickaxe, wiped his hands on his trousers. "Stay here," he said to Anna. "Jacob, stay here." He walked toward the riders. They had stopped at the edge of the work site, their horses stamping and snorting, tossing their heads against the flies. Brennan sat easy in his saddle, looking down at Jacob with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Miller." His voice was smooth, friendly, wrong, like honey poured over something rotten. "Working hard. I see. Brennan. Quite the project you got going here." Brennan's gaze swept across the dam. The basin, the small pool of collected water. "Must have been at it for weeks. What do you want?" Brennan laughed. A soft, oily sound. "Straight to business. I always did like that about you, Miller. No wasted words." He shifted in his saddle, the leather creaking. "I heard tell about your little dam. Thought I'd ride on over and see it for myself." "You've seen it. Now you can go." In a minute. Brennan's smile faded, the mask slipping. "We need to palaver first." He dismounted, his boots polished black leather. Probably cost more than Jacob made in 3 months crunched on the dry ground. The 2 men with him stayed mounted, hands resting near their holsters. Their eyes were flat and watchful. "This water you're collecting," Brennan said, walking closer. "You know where it comes from. The seep. And where does the seep come from?" Brennan stepped closer still. Jacob could smell him now, pomade and cigars and something underneath. Something sharp like sweat gone sour. "It comes from runoff. Runoff that used to flow downhill onto my property. That runoff dried up 2 months ago. Because there ain't been no rain. But when the rain comes, and it will come, sooner or later that water belongs to me." Brennan's voice hardened, the friendly tone dropping away like a shed skin. "You're stealing my water, Miller." Jacob felt the anger rise in his chest, hot and tight. He pushed it down, kept his voice level. "That water don't belong to you. It don't belong to anyone. It comes from the hills, flows through the land, and goes where it goes. You don't own the rain, Brennan. I own the land it falls on. Not this land." They stood face to face, close enough that Jacob could smell the tobacco on Brennan's breath, close enough to see the small veins broken across his nose, the yellow tinge in the whites of his eyes. "I'm going to make this real simple," Brennan said. "I want to buy your ranch. All of it. The house, the cattle, the land." He paused, letting the words hang. "And this here dam. It ain't for sale. Everything's for sale, Miller. It's just a question of price." Brennan reached into his coat, pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I'm prepared to offer you $3,000, cash money. You can take it and start over somewhere else. California, maybe. I hear the weather's right pleasant out that way." $3,000. It was more money than Jacob had seen in his entire life, more than the ranch was worth. Especially now, with the cattle dying and the debts piling up like stones on a grave. "No," he said. Brennan's eyebrows rose. "No. I was born on this land. My father built that house with his own 2 hands. My wife is buried here. My son is buried here." Jacob's voice was steady, though his heart pounded against his ribs. "I ain't leaving. That's sentiment talking. I'm offering you a future. I got a future. Right here." Brennan's jaw tightened. The friendly mask fell away completely now, revealing something harder underneath, something cold and mean. "You're making a mistake, Miller. Maybe so. But it's my mistake to make." The silence stretched between them. The horses shifted. One of Brennan's men spat tobacco juice into the dust. And then Brennan's eyes moved, past Jacob, to where Anna stood watching from the edge of the dig site, the shovel still in her hands. His smile returned, colder now, cruel. Well, he walked toward her, ignoring Jacob's stiffening posture. "Who do we have here?" Anna did not move, did not speak. She held the shovel in front of her, knuckles white around the handle. Brennan stopped in front of her, looked her up and down with an appraising gaze that made Jacob's fists clench so tight his knuckles cracked. "Where'd you come from?" "Sweetheart, I don't recall seeing you in town." His smile widened, showing teeth. "Let me guess. Ordered from a catalog, Miller finally got tired of keeping his own company." "That's enough." Jacob's voice was low, dangerous. He did not recognize the sound of it. Brennan turned. "Just making conversation. Miller, no need to get your hackles up. Make it somewhere else." Touchy. Brennan laughed. "She must be something special. This one." He looked at Anna again. "What's your name?" "Honey? Her name ain't none of your concern." Jacob stepped between them. His hand shook with the effort of keeping it at his side. "She's family, and you need to leave. Now. Family." Brennan's eyebrows rose high on his forehead. "I didn't know you had any family left. Miller? Thought the fever took care of that." The words hit like a fist to the gut. Jacob felt the blood drain from his face. "Get off my land." The 2 men stared at each other. Something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps of lines drawn and boundaries tested, of wars declared without a single shot fired. Brennan stepped back, raised his hands in mock surrender. All right. I can see you ain't in a negotiating mood today." He walked back to his horse, mounted with the easy grace of a man who had spent his whole life in the saddle. "But you think about my offer. Miller. $3,000. It's a generous price for a dying ranch and a stubborn fool." "The ranch ain't dying. Not yet." Brennan gathered his reins. His eyes glittered in the morning light. "But things change. Droughts get worse. Cattle die. Accidents happen." He smiled a thin, mean smile that did not touch his eyes. "There's all kinds of ways to make a man change his mind." He wheeled his horse. His men fell in behind him. They rode off the way they had come, leaving nothing behind but hoof prints in the dust and the smell of horses and expensive tobacco. Jacob watched them go. His heart pounded against his ribs like a trapped animal. Anna came to stand beside him. Her face was pale beneath the sunburn. "He'll come back, won't he?" "Yes." "What will you do?" Jacob did not answer. He looked down at his hands empty, calloused, shaking slightly. "Jacob, He turned toward the house, started walking. "Jacob, where are you going?" He did not reply. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust with each step. The sun beat down on his shoulders. The anger burned in his chest like a coal that would not die. Inside the house, he stopped in front of the fireplace, above the mantel. Mounted on wooden pegs worn smooth with age, hung his Winchester rifle. It had been his father's before him. He had not touched it in 3 years, not since the day he had considered using it on himself, and decided he was too much of a coward even for that. He reached up. His fingers brushed the stock. Cool, smooth, familiar. "Don't." He turned. Anna stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright rectangle of light. "Don't," she said again. "That's what he wants. He wants you to do something foolish, something he can use against you. He threatened us. He threatened with words. Words ain't bullets." Jacob's hand fell away from the rifle. He stood there, breathing hard, staring at the weapon. "My father told me once," he said slowly, "that a man who picks up a gun better be ready to use it. And a man who uses it better be ready to live with what comes after. Are you ready?" The question hung in the air. Jacob closed his eyes, saw Sarah's face, Samuel's grin, the 2 graves on the hillside, side by side, marked with wooden crosses he had carved with his own hands. "No," he said. "I ain't." He walked past Anna, out of the house, back toward the dig site. After a moment, he heard her footsteps following. They worked until dark. Neither spoke of Brennan, neither spoke of the rifle. But that night, lying in his bed, Jacob heard something he had not heard in months. Horses, distant but unmistakable, moving slowly along the ridge that marked the boundary between his land and Brennan's. He went to the window, looked out. Moonlight, empty fields, silence. But he knew someone was watching. The first cow died at dawn. Jacob found her behind the barn, lying on her side in the dust. Her eyes were open, glazed, staring at nothing. Her tongue hung from her mouth, swollen and black, crusted with dirt. Flies had already found her a dark, buzzing cloud that rose when he approached, then settled again. He stood over the body for a long time. His hands hung at his sides. His mind was empty, scraped clean like a bone left in the sun. Then he walked to the shed, got the shovel, started digging. By noon, 2 more were dead. The herd had gathered around the water trough, but the trough was empty. The well had given up its last bucket that morning, brown water, more mud than liquid, smelling of rot and iron. Jacob had poured it into the trough anyway, watched the cattle fight over it, shoving and lowing, lapping at the sludge with desperate tongues. It was not enough. It would never be enough. He dragged the 3rd carcass to the pit he had dug behind the barn. The animal was heavy, maybe 600 pounds of dead weight. Jacob's arms screamed as he hauled it by the hind legs through the dust. His boots slipped on a patch of loose earth. His grip failed. He went down backward, landing hard on his tailbone. The dead cow's leg still clutched in his hands. He lay there in the dirt. The sky above was white and empty. The sun beat down without mercy. Flies buzzed around his head, landed on his face, crawled across his lips. "Get up," he told himself. "Get up." His body did not move. The smell of the dead cow filled his nose, blood and bile and the first sour hint of rot. His shirt was soaked through with sweat, plastered to his skin. His trousers were caked with mud and worse. He could feel the grit between his teeth, taste the dust on his tongue. Get up. He could not. Anna found him an hour later, still lying beside the carcass. She did not speak. She simply knelt beside him, slipped her arm under his shoulders, and helped him to his feet. His legs shook. His head swam. He leaned on her more than he wanted to admit. "We need supplies," she said. "From town." Jacob shook his head. "I'll go tomorrow. We need them today. The flour is gone. The coffee is gone. We got nothing for supper." He looked at her sunburned face, at the dirt caked in the lines around her eyes, at the way she held herself straight despite everything. "All right," he said. "I'll go." The ride to town took 2 hours. Jacob sat slumped in the saddle, his horse plodding along the dusty road. The animal was thin now, ribs showing through its hide like the bars of a cage. It had been a good horse once, strong, fast. Now it was just another thing dying by inches. The town appeared on the horizon, a cluster of wooden buildings bleached pale by the sun, a church steeple rising above the rest, a water tower that had stood empty for weeks. Jacob tied his horse outside the general store, walked up the steps. His boots sounded hollow on the boards, pushed open the door. The conversation inside stopped. 3 men stood at the counter. Old Henderson, who ran the feed store, a man Jacob had known for 20 years. Young Pete Macklin, whose father owned the livery. And Silas Brennan's foreman, a thick-necked man named Garrett with a scar running down his cheek like a dried riverbed. They all turned to look at Jacob. "Miller." Henderson's voice was cool, distant, like talking to a stranger. "Didn't expect to see you in town. Needed supplies." "I'll bet you do." Garrett smiled. It was not a friendly expression. His teeth were yellow, tobacco-stained. "Hard to keep a ranch running when you're hoarding all the water for yourself." Jacob's jaw tightened. "I ain't hoarding anything." "That ain't what I heard." Garrett leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Word is you're building a dam up there, catching all the runoff before it can reach anyone else's land." "That ain't true." "No. Then what are you doing with all that water?" Jacob felt the eyes on him. Henderson, Macklin, the store clerk behind the counter, his hand frozen on a bolt of cloth. Others, too, gathering in the doorway, drawn by the sound of raised voices. "The dam is for everyone," he said. "When the rains come, the water will collect in the basin. Anyone who needs it can come and take their share. That was always the plan." "Sure it was." Garrett pushed off the counter, walked toward Jacob. His boots were loud on the wooden floor. "And I reckon you were fixing to tell everyone about this generous offer. Or were you going to wait until we was all desperate? Then charge us for the privilege?" "I wasn't going to charge anyone." "Easy to say now." Garrett was close now. Close enough that Jacob could smell the chewing tobacco on his breath, the sweat in his clothes. "But Mr. Brennan tells a different story. Says you've been stealing water that belongs to him. Says you got no right to that land, no right to that dam, no right to any of it." "Brennan's a liar." The words came out before Jacob could stop them. Garrett's smile vanished. His hand moved toward his hip, resting on the butt of his pistol. "You want to say that again?" Jacob's heart hammered in his chest. His hands were empty. He had left his gun at home, just like before. He was unarmed, surrounded by men who looked at him like he was something they had scraped off the bottom of their boots. "I said Brennan is a liar." His voice did not waver, though his knees felt like water. "He wants my land. He's been wanting it for years. This dam business is just an excuse." "The dam is theft." Garrett's fingers curled around his pistol grip. "And you know what we do with thieves around here." "That's enough." A new voice. Calm, quiet, but carrying the weight of authority. Jacob turned. Reverend Thomas stood in the doorway of the general store. He was a small man, 70 years old, with white hair thin as corn silk and a face like weathered leather. He had baptized Jacob as an infant, had married Jacob and Sarah in the little white church at the edge of town, had spoken the words over their graves while Jacob stood silent, unable to cry. "This ain't none of your concern, preacher," Garrett said. "Everything that happens in this town is my concern." Thomas walked into the store. His footsteps were slow but steady, the steps of a man who had walked a long road and was not afraid of what lay ahead. "And I reckon I've heard quite enough accusations for one day. Accusations Miller here. Miller here is a man I've known his entire life, his father before him, his grandfather before that." Thomas stopped beside Jacob, looked up at him with those faded blue eyes that had seen so much. "I ain't never known a Miller to steal anything." "Then you don't know them as well as you reckon." "Perhaps not." Thomas turned to face the crowd that had gathered. "Or perhaps I know them better than those who spread rumors for their own benefit." His gaze moved to Garrett. "Mr. Brennan has been buying up land in this county for 15 years. Every drought, every hard winter, he swoops in and offers pennies on the dollar to desperate families. I wonder how many of you folks remember that." Silence. "There will be a town meeting," Thomas said. "Sunday, after services. Everyone will have a chance to speak their piece, including Jacob, including Mr. Brennan, if he's of a mind to show up." He looked at Garrett. "Tell your employer he's invited. If he's got accusations to make, he can make them to all of us, in public, where we can all hear the truth and judge for ourselves." Garrett's jaw worked. His hand fell away from his pistol. "Mr. Brennan ain't going to be happy about this. Mr. Brennan's happiness ain't my concern." Thomas turned back to Jacob. "Go home, son. Get some rest. Sunday is 3 days away." The ride home was longer than the ride in. Jacob slumped in the saddle, the bag of supplies tied behind him. His horse walked slowly, head down, as exhausted as its rider. The sun was setting when he reached the ranch. The sky painted red and orange, colors that meant nothing to him anymore. Anna was waiting on the porch. She stood when she saw him coming. Her face was pale in the fading light. What happened? He dismounted, tied the horse to the rail, walked past her without speaking. Inside, he found the bottle of whiskey in the cabinet above the sink, pulled the cork with his teeth, poured a glass. His hands shook so badly that the whiskey sloshed over the rim, spilling onto the floor. The smell of it rose up, sharp and burning. He drank anyway. "Jacob." Anna stood in the doorway, watching. He poured another glass, drank it. The whiskey burned his throat, settled in his empty stomach like fire. He poured a third. "Maybe I should just sell—" The words came out slurred, bitter, soaked in defeat. "Maybe Brennan's right. I can't keep anything alive. Couldn't keep the cattle alive. Couldn't keep—" He stopped. His throat closed around the words. Couldn't keep them alive, neither. He stared at the whiskey in his glass. His reflection stared back, distorted, broken. "Sarah, Samuel, I promised to take care of them. I promised I'd protect them. Jacob, I break everything I touch." He laughed, a hollow, ugly sound that did not belong in a human throat. "Every single thing." He threw the glass. It shattered against the wall, whiskey running down the wood like tears. Anna did not flinch. She walked toward him, stopped in front of him, looked up at his face. "You kept your word to me," she said quietly. You gave me a home when no one else would. You treated me with dignity when I had none left. That ain't. You kept your integrity, even when Brennan tried to buy you, even when his man put his hand on his gun. Her voice was steady, fierce, like a flame that refused to die. That is something Brennan can never take from you. That is something he can never buy. Jacob stared at her. His vision blurred, his chest heaved. I don't know how to keep going, he whispered. I don't know how to do this no more. Anna reached up, placed her hand against his cheek. Her palm was warm and rough with calluses. Then, let me help you. That night, Jacob sat on the porch steps, watching the darkness. Anna sat beside him. Neither spoke. The stars wheeled overhead. The wind moved through the dry grass with a sound like whispering. And then lights. Torches. 6 of them. Moving across the ridge to the east like fireflies in the dark. Jacob stood. His blood ran cold. The lights were heading toward the dam. Jacob ran. His boots pounded against the hard-packed earth. His lungs burned. The night air was cold against his sweat-soaked skin. The torches moved across the ridge like a procession of ghosts, bobbing and weaving through the darkness. He had no gun, no weapon, nothing but his hands and his legs, and the blood hammering in his ears. The dam came into view. Moonlight glinted off the shallow pool that had collected in the basin weeks of work, weeks of sweat and blisters and aching muscles, all of it sitting there in the silver light, waiting to be destroyed. 5 men stood at the edge of the dam. Their torches threw dancing shadows across the ground, made the water shimmer like something alive. One of them, Garrett. Brennan's foreman held a pickaxe raised above his head, the blade catching the firelight. Jacob stumbled to a stop 20 feet away. His chest heaved. His voice came out raw, broken. Don't. Garrett turned. The torchlight caught the scar on his face, made it look fresh and angry. Miller. He lowered the pickaxe, smiled that yellow-toothed smile. Didn't expect you so soon. Please. The word tore itself from Jacob's throat. He did not recognize his own voice, the desperation in it, the nakedness. Please don't do this. Mr. Brennan's orders. Garrett shrugged. Nothing personal. You understand. It's everything personal. Jacob stepped forward. His legs shook beneath him. This dam, this water, it ain't just for me. It's for everyone. The whole town. The town can get water from Mr. Brennan. He'll sell it to them. Fair price. And what happens when he raises that price when folks can't pay? Jacob's hands curled into fists. He'll own everyone, every farm, every family. Is that what you want? Garrett's smile faltered, just for a moment, a flicker of something human behind the mask. I don't want anything. I just do what I'm told. You're a man. Ain't you? Jacob took another step. You make your own choices. You don't have to do this. The other men shifted. One of them a young man, barely more than a boy. His face smooth and pale in the torchlight looked down at the torch in his hand. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Mr. Garrett, the boy said, maybe we ought to shut your mouth, Danny. But he's right. Danny's voice cracked. My ma lives in town. She can barely afford water as it is. If Mr. Brennan controls everything, I said shut it. Danny fell silent, but he did not move. He stood there, torch in hand, staring at the dam like he was really seeing it for the first time. Jacob looked at the other men, recognized some of their faces now. Tom Hadley's nephew, who had lost his father to the fever the same year Jacob lost Sarah and Samuel. Marcus Webb's cousin, whose farm had failed 2 years back, bought up by Brennan for a fraction of its worth. Men who had grievances of their own. Men who had reasons to hate Brennan as much as anyone. "You all know me," Jacob said. His voice was steadier now. "You knew my father. You know what kind of man I am." He spread his hands, showing them empty. "I ain't your enemy. Brennan is—" Garrett's jaw tightened. "Pretty words, Miller, but they don't change nothing. They change everything." Jacob stepped closer, close enough now to see the sweat beading on Garrett's forehead, the uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "You can destroy this dam tonight. You can do what Brennan wants, but then what, you go home. You look at yourself in the mirror come morning. You live with what you done." He paused. Let the silence stretch. The torches crackled and hissed. "Or you can walk away. Tell Brennan you couldn't find it in the dark. Tell him whatever you want. But walk away knowing you did the right thing. The decent thing." Garrett stared at him. The pickaxe hung loose in his grip. Behind him, Danny set his torch down on the ground. The flames sputtered in the dirt. "I ain't doing this," the boy said. His voice was quiet but steady. "I'm sorry, Mr. Garrett. I just can't." Another man followed, set down his torch, stepped back from the dam, then another, and another. One by one, they moved away, their torches lowering, their faces turning from the firelight into shadow. Garrett stood alone. His knuckles were white around the pickaxe handle. His breath came hard and fast, fogging in the cool night air. Jacob could see the war playing out behind his eyes, fear of Brennan, fear of himself, fear of the man he might become if he swung that blade. "Your choice," Jacob said quietly. "Nobody else's." The pickaxe trembled in Garrett's hands. And then, slowly, painfully, he let it fall to the ground. It landed with a dull thud. "This ain't over," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Mr. Brennan won't let it go." "I know." Garrett turned, walked past his men without looking at them. His boots crunched on the dry earth as he disappeared into the darkness. The others followed, one by one, melting into the night like ghosts. Danny was the last to go. He stopped beside Jacob, started to speak, then just shook his head and walked away. Jacob stood alone at the edge of the dam. His legs gave out. He sank to his knees in the dirt, his whole body shaking. The moon hung overhead. The water gleamed. The dam still stood. Sunday morning. The church was full. Jacob sat in the back pew, Anna beside him. Every seat was taken. Folks stood along the walls, crowded into the doorway, spilled out onto the steps. The whole town had come, farmers in their Sunday best. Women in calico dresses, children squirming in their seats. The air smelled of candle wax and hair oil and the faint mustiness of hymnals. Reverend Thomas stood at the pulpit, his white hair catching the light that streamed through the stained glass windows, red and gold and blue, painting patterns on the wooden floor. "We are gathered here," he said, "to settle a matter that has divided this community, the matter of Jacob Miller's dam." A murmur ran through the crowd. Jacob felt the eyes on him, some curious, some suspicious, some openly hostile. He kept his gaze fixed on the wooden cross behind the pulpit. Brennan sat in the front pew, flanked by a man in a city suit, a lawyer, by the look of him, and two of his ranch hands. He wore his finest clothes, his gold watch chain gleaming against his vest. His face was calm, confident, the face of a man who had already won. "Mr. Brennan," Thomas said, "you have made accusations against Mr. Miller. Would you care to speak first?" Brennan rose, walked to the front of the church with the easy stride of a man accustomed to being listened to. He turned to face the congregation, his hands clasped behind his back. Friends, he said. I ain't here to make accusations. I'm here to state facts. He smiled, that warm, practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. Jacob Miller has built a dam on his property. A dam that captures water that would otherwise flow onto my land. Water that my cattle need to survive. He paused, letting the words sink in. Now, I ain't an unreasonable man. I offered to buy Mr. Miller's property at a fair price, more than fair, truth be told, but he refused. Brennan shook his head sadly. I don't understand why. His ranch is failing. His cattle are dying. What does he stand to gain by holding on? Maybe he's got something you don't understand, a voice called out. Something called pride. Heads turned. Old Mrs. Henderson, the widow, 80 years old, bent over her cane like a question mark, had risen from her seat. Her voice was thin but steady. I remember your father, Silas Brennan. He came to this valley with nothing but the clothes on his back and a hungry look in his eye. My husband gave him his first job, fed him at our table. Her eyes were hard as flint. He would be ashamed to see what you've become. Brennan's smile flickered. Mrs. Henderson, I don't reckon. I ain't finished. She pointed her cane at him. I also remember Jacob Miller's father. He dug the first well in this town with his own 2 hands, gave water to anyone who needed it, and never asked for a penny in return. She turned to look at Jacob, and her expression softened. His son is the same kind of man. Another voice rose. Tom Hadley, standing near the window, his hat in his hands. Jacob helped me bury my wife, he said. Dug the grave himself when I was too weak to lift a shovel. Didn't ask for nothing in return. He fixed my wagon last spring, Marcus Webb added from the back. Wouldn't take payment. Said neighbors help neighbors. He brought food to my family when we had nothing. This from a woman Jacob barely knew, the wife of a sharecropper who had moved away months ago. One by one, they spoke. Stories Jacob had forgotten. Small kindnesses he had done without thinking, without expecting anything back. A lifetime of quiet decency, laid out before the congregation like evidence at a trial. Brennan's face grew tight. His smile vanished. This is all real touching, he said, his voice harder now. But it don't change the facts. The dam is stealing water that rightfully belongs to... The dam is for everyone. Anna's voice. Jacob turned. She had risen from the pew, her hands trembling at her sides, but her chin lifted, her eyes clear. I've been at that ranch for weeks now, she said, her voice carried to every corner of the church. I've worked beside Mr. Miller every day. I've seen what he's building with my own eyes. She looked around at the assembled faces. The dam ain't for him alone. It's for all of you. When the rains come, the basin will fill. There'll be enough water for every farm in this valley. And why should we believe you? Brennan's voice was cold now, stripped of all pretense. You're just a what? Anna stepped into the aisle. A mail-order bride, a woman with nothing, someone you'd throw away like yesterday's newspaper. The church went silent. Even the children stopped squirming. I know what I am, Anna said. I know what folks think of me, but I also know what I've seen. Jacob Miller ain't no thief. He ain't no liar. He's a man who lost everything he loved and still chose to help others instead of giving up. Her voice cracked slightly. She steadied it. That's more than some people in this room can say. Her eyes found Brennan, held him there. He looked away first. Reverend Thomas cleared his throat. I believe we've heard enough. All those who believe Mr. Miller ought to be allowed to keep his dam. Please rise. The sound of scraping wood filled the church. One person, then 5, then 20. The entire congregation rose to their feet, pew by pew, until only Brennan and his men remained seated. The silence was absolute. Brennan stood. His face was pale beneath the flush of anger. His jaw worked, but no words came out. He walked down the aisle. His lawyer followed. His men followed. The crowd parted to let them pass. At the door, Brennan paused, looked back at Jacob. Something passed between them. Not hatred. Exactly. Not respect either. Something else entirely, the recognition of a battle lost. Then he was gone. After the service, folks gathered in the churchyard under the old oak trees. They came to Jacob one by one, shaking his hand, clapping his shoulder, offering help with the dam. Men who had avoided him for months now spoke to him like neighbors again. Women pressed jars of preserves and wrapped bundles of food into his hands. Jacob stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed. Anna appeared beside him. Her hand brushed against his. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for what you said in there. I only told the truth. Still." She looked up at him. Those gray eyes, that steady gaze. "What happens now?" she asked. Before he could answer, old Emmett Hawkins pushed through the crowd, his face flushed, his breath coming in gasps. "Jacob, you need to see this." "See what?" Emmett pointed toward the west, toward the horizon. Clouds, dark and heavy, piling up against the sky like a wall of stone. "Storm's coming," Emmett said. "A big one. Maybe the biggest I've seen in 40 years. Jacob stared at the clouds, at the lightning flickering deep within them. The dam was only half finished. They came at dawn. Wagons appeared on the horizon, one after another, kicking up dust against the gray sky. Jacob stood on the porch, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands, watching them approach. Tom Hadley was first. His wagon was loaded with shovels, pickaxes, wooden planks. His 2 sons sat beside him, young men with strong backs and calloused hands, their faces set with purpose. "Heard you could use some help," Tom said. Climbing down from the seat, behind him came Marcus Webb with a cartload of stones, then the Henderson boys with their mule team, then families Jacob barely knew, sharecroppers, merchants, farmers from the far edges of the county, all of them carrying tools, supplies, food wrapped in cloth. By the time the sun cleared the horizon, 30 people had gathered in his yard. Reverend Thomas arrived last, his old mare plodding along the road. He dismounted slowly, his joints stiff, his white hair ruffling in the wind. "Well," he said, looking at the crowd, "what are we all standing around for?" The work began. Jacob led them to the dam site. The clouds in the west had grown darker overnight, spreading across the sky like a bruise that would not heal. Lightning flickered in their depths. The air smelled of moisture, faint but unmistakable, like a promise waiting to be kept. "We need another 2 feet on the walls," Jacob said, pointing. "Maybe 3 to be safe. And the spillway's got to be reinforced, or the first big surge will wash it all away." Tom Hadley studied the terrain. His eyes narrowed. "We split into teams, half on the walls, half on the spillway. Rotate every hour so nobody drops from exhaustion." The men nodded, picked up their tools, spread out across the work site. Jacob grabbed a pickaxe, swung it into the earth. The blade bit deep, the impact jarring up through his arms. Beside him, Marcus Webb drove his shovel into the loosened soil. On his other side, young Danny, the boy who had set down his torch 3 nights ago, hauled stones from the wagon to the growing wall. Their eyes met. Danny nodded once. Jacob nodded back. No one spoke of what had happened. No one needed to. The women set up a station beneath the oak tree. Tables appeared from somewhere, planks laid across sawhorses covered with white cloths. Plates of biscuits piled high, jars of preserves with handwritten labels. A massive pot of beans hanging over a fire pit. The smell of molasses and salt pork rising on the breeze. Coffee urging from a blackened kettle, strong enough to stand a spoon in. Mrs. Henderson directed the operation from a chair someone had carried out for her, her cane tapping the ground whenever anyone moved too slow. Anna worked among them. Jacob caught glimpses of her throughout the morning carrying water to the men in tin cups, helping to slice bread, her sleeves rolled up past her elbows and her hair coming loose from its pins. She belonged here. The realization struck him like a blow to the chest. She belonged. Noon. The clouds had swallowed the sun. The dam walls had risen another foot. The spillway was taking shape, a channel carved into the eastern bank that would carry overflow away from the basin when the water rose too high. Jacob paused to drink from the cup someone pressed into his hands. His arms ached. His back screamed with a deep, grinding pain. Sweat dripped from his chin despite the cooling air. "Rest a spell," Tom Hadley said. "You ain't no good to us dead on your feet. I can keep going. You can barely stand upright." Tom took the cup back. 15 minutes. Eat something. Then we finish this thing together." Jacob walked to the oak tree, sat down heavily on a stone. His legs trembled beneath him. Anna appeared with a plate, biscuits and beans, a slice of apple pie someone had brought. She sat beside him without speaking. They ate in silence. Around them, the sounds of work continued, picks striking earth, shovels scraping stone, men calling to each other across the site. The thunder rumbled closer. "It's going to work," Anna said quietly. Jacob looked at the dam, at the people building it, at the basin that would soon hold water enough to keep the cattle alive, to see the crops through, to carry them all into another year. "Maybe," he said. "Not maybe." She turned to face him. "Look at them. Jacob. They came for you. Because of who you are. Because of what you've done for them over the years. Even when you thought nobody was paying attention." He looked. Tom Hadley, who had buried his wife in the same graveyard where Sarah and Samuel lay. Marcus Webb, who had lost his farm but not his spirit. Mrs. Henderson, 80 years old and still giving orders like a general. The young men and the old, the strong and the weary, all of them working together, for him, for each other. "I forgot," he said. His voice was rough. "I forgot what it felt like to be part of something bigger than myself." Anna's hand found his. Her fingers were rough and warm. "You remembered," she said. "That's what matters." By late afternoon, the dam was finished. The walls stood 4 feet high, packed tight with earth and stone. The spillway cut a clean channel through the eastern bank. The basin lay ready, waiting for the water that would fill it. The workers gathered at the edge of the dam, dirty, exhausted, proud. Reverend Thomas stepped forward, removed his hat, bowed his head. "Lord," he said, "we ask your blessing on this work. We ask that the rains come and fill this basin. We ask that the water sustain this community through the trials ahead." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick. "And we thank you for the man who started it, for his perseverance, for his faith, for his goodness, even when he couldn't see it in himself." "Amen," the crowd murmured. "Amen," Jacob whispered. The families began to leave as the first drops fell. Just a few at first, fat and heavy, striking the dry earth with small puffs of dust that smelled of rain and renewal. Then more. The drops came faster, thicker, until the air was filled with the sound of water hitting ground. The wagons rolled out one by one. Hands waved from under canvas covers. Voices called out farewells that were swallowed by the growing storm. Jacob stood at the edge of the dam, watching the rain fill the basin. The water rose slowly, at first an inch, then 2, then 3. The spillway began to trickle, then to flow. Anna stood beside him. Her dress was soaked through, clinging to her shoulders. Her hair hung in wet ropes around her face. She did not seem to notice. She was smiling. "It's working," she said. Jacob watched the water rise, watched the basin fill, watched the months of labor and sweat and despair transform into something real, something lasting. "Yes," he said, "it is." They walked back to the house as the storm reached its peak. The rain fell in sheets now, hammering the roof, pouring off the eaves in silver curtains. Thunder rolled across the sky like the voice of something ancient and powerful. Lightning flashed, illuminating the yard in stark white bursts. Jacob stopped on the porch, turned to face the storm. The land was drinking. He could almost see it happening, the cracks in the earth closing. The grass lifting its head, the trees shaking off the dust of months. Life was returning to the valley, drop by drop, inch by inch. Anna stood beside him. Water dripped from her chin. Her chest rose and fell with each breath. "Jacob," he looked at her. "I don't want to leave," she said. Her voice was barely audible above the rain. "I know the arrangement was supposed to be temporary. I know I was just meant to be the housekeeper, but stay." And the word came out before he could think, before he could doubt, before the fear could stop him. "Stay," he said again. "Not as the housekeeper, not as anything you were before." He turned to face her fully. His hands trembled as he reached for hers. "Stay as whatever you want to be, whatever we become together." Her eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, the trap, the hidden cruelty. She found none. "Are you sure?" she whispered. He reached into his pocket. His fingers found the small object he had placed there that morning, a silver ring, simple and plain, that had belonged to his mother. He had not known why he put it there when he dressed for church, not until this moment. He held it up. The metal caught the lightning flash, gleaming briefly in the darkness. "I'm sure." Anna looked at the ring, at his face, at the ring again. "Yes," she said. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit like it had been made for her. They stood there on the porch, the rain falling around them, the thunder rolling overhead. Jacob pulled her close, felt the warmth of her body against his, smelled the rain in her hair. For the first time in 3 years, the house behind them did not feel empty. For the first time in 3 years, the future did not feel like something to be endured. Anna lifted her face. Their foreheads touched. "We should go inside," she said, "before we catch our death out here." In a minute. He was not ready to move, not ready to let go of this moment. The rain on the roof, the lightning in the sky, the woman in his arms. "In a minute," he said again. They stood together, watching the storm, watching the water fill the basin, watching the land come back to life. The rain fell all night. 1 year later. The basin held. When the storm passed and the sun rose over a washed, clean world, the water stood 3 feet deep, clear and cool and pure. The cattle came to drink. The neighbors came to fill their barrels. Life returned to the valley, 1 bucket at a time. Jacob and Anna were married in the little white church at the edge of town. On a Sunday morning in October, when the leaves were turning gold, Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony. The whole town attended. Mrs. Henderson cried into her handkerchief and pretended she had dust in her eye. They planted a garden in the spring, built a new room onto the house come summer. sat together on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over land that was green again. 2 rocking chairs now, side by side, sometimes late at night. Jacob still walked out to the 2 graves on the hillside. He would stand there in the darkness, hat in his hands, talking to Sarah and Samuel, telling them about the ranch, about the garden, about Anna. He liked to think they approved. One evening in September, as the fireflies rose from the grass and the stars emerged one by one, Anna came to stand beside him at the graves. She slipped her hand into his, said nothing. They walked back to the house together. On the porch, Anna paused, placed her hand over her belly, looked up at him with something new in her eyes, something tender and frightened and hopeful all at once. "Jacob," she said, "I've been meaning to tell you something." He looked at her hand, at her face, at the tears gathering in the corners of her eyes, and he understood. He pulled her close, held her tight, felt her heart beating against his chest. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "Thank you." The crickets sang. The wind moved through the grass. Somewhere in the darkness, a mockingbird called out 3 notes, rising, like a question finally answered. Jacob Miller held his wife and thought of all the years ahead, the work and the worry, the joy and the sorrow, the life they would build together, one day at a time. He was not afraid anymore. The end. If you have read this far, I thank you kindly. This story was not written for critics or scholars. It was written for you, the one who remembers what it felt like to sit on a porch swing at dusk, watching fireflies rise over the pasture. The one who knows that love is not always thunder and lightning, but sometimes just 2 weary souls choosing each other, day after day, through drought and storm and silence. Jacob and Anna are not real folks, but what they stand for is the courage to begin again when everything has been lost, the grace to accept help when pride says otherwise, the quiet strength of ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply by refusing to give up on each other. I hope their story reminded you of something good, something true, something worth holding on to. Until we meet again on another page. Dear friend, the storyteller. Disclaimer. This work is inspired by classic American Western tales and frontier literature, created solely for entertainment purposes. The story does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters, names, locations, and events depicted herein are entirely products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, or to real events and places is purely coincidental and unintentional.